conclusion of the official report about whether Sarah Palin abused her power as governor of Alaska by firing that state's public safety commissioner after he wouldn't fire a state trooper she wanted fired. The conclusion? Governor Palin abused her power. Okay, here's what Sarah Palin says about that report. Quote, "I'm very, very pleased to be cleared of any legal wrongdoing, any hint of any kind of unethical activity." Huh? Hold on, wait a minute, let us put some truth in it. First, though, it's time for a few underreported holy mackerel stories in today's news. Starting with news from Afghanistan and life during wartime, hundreds of Taliban fighters staged an ambitious multi-pronged assault over the weekend aimed at capturing the capital city of Helmand province in southern Afghanistan. General David McKiernan told reporters that NATO forces fought off the attack, killing over 60 Taliban fighters. But the takeaway here is decidedly scary. Used to be that insurgents avoided direct confrontations at well-guarded sites. Now they are apparently eager enough for the propaganda victory and sure enough that they have plenty of fighters to spare that they're going for big, high-profile goals like attacking capital cities. In terms of U.S. strategy in Afghanistan, Julian Barnes at the Los Angeles Times reports that U.S. military leaders are not considering a U.S. troop surge for Afghanistan, no matter what Sarah Palin and John McCain say to the contrary. U.S. forces, however, are reportedly considering arming Afghan tribal militias. In Iraq, the Sunni awakening, you might remember, started among tribal groups before and totally independent of the U.S. troop surge. That's the factor that's considered to be the strongest explanation for why violence declined in Iraq, the so-called Sunni awakening. In Afghanistan, the same kind of thing does not appear to be happening on its own. But if the LA Times is correct, the U.S. military is thinking about trying to start the same sort of ball rolling in Afghanistan by arming the warlords' fighters, the tribal militias. If you feel like you're having a weird flashback to the 80s and the Russians and us arming guys like, Osama bin Laden and the Mujahideen, you are not flashing back alone. Isn't it amazing how if you ask the question the right way, the answer always seems to be send more weapons? Speaking of more weapons, whatever happened to Paul Wolfowitz? After Paul Wolfowitz sold us the war in Iraq as an easy-peasy, pay-for-itself weapons of mass destruction pickup that would take like 5 minutes and 5 soldiers and $5, then he was off to the World Bank, where he came within about 5 inches of being the first World Bank president ever to be fired. Well, guys like Paul Wolfowitz have a way of failing up in this world. And thanks to his awesome track record on international affairs, the State Department now has him running the International Security Advisory Board to give our government advice on weapons of mass destruction. Wolfowitz was really the best guy for this job? Are you sure? It's like hiring Cousin It to cut your hair. Anyway, the International Security Advisory Board, under the leadership of Paul Wolfowitz, has just recommended that we really ought to consider scaling up our atomic arsenal to make sure we are keeping a nuclear-armed China on its toes. Quote, "The U.S. must undertake the development of new weapons to convince China that it will not be able to overcome the U.S. militarily." You know what? If you're going to try to sell us on a new Cold War and a new nuclear arms race with China, you might want to invest in a better salesman. If Paul Wolfowitz and Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney and all the rest of the horsemen from this past 8-year apocalypse were selling a no-calorie, bacon-flavored aphrodisiac, nobody would buy it. Come on, you guys. Jeez. Come on.